Hiya Steve, great to meet up with you and do some further work on your swing. Pleasure as always, and some good progress in this session I thought. First of all, if we look at you on the top left, this is the early part of your session. Getting the flex back into that right knee, much more than in previous visits. The right hip not raising quite as much as in previous visits also. And as a result, the butt of the club is tracing a much better route back down to the ball from P4 to P5 than what we saw historically, which would be the butt of the club working this way as you pushed up out the ground too quick, straightening both legs, head raising off the wall, etc. So your ability to get back into flexion from P4 to P5 based on this exercise that you see yourself demonstrating here has improved dramatically. And what we said previously, that was because you were pushing up out of the ground so fast and never getting back into flexion, there was no rotation of the hips, so the pelvis would fly pretty much straight towards the ball here, hips tucking under too fast, and consequently no amount of hip slide was going to offset that extension. And we talked about the effects that hip slide have in your swing and the various parts of your swing, and obviously through impact, certainly from P6 onwards, the sliding of the hips is more to do with maintaining your inclination to the ground. So we were working a lot on getting that flexing in there, so that now as we start to slide the hips continuously through the downswing, that has the desired effect at each part of the swing. So obviously the linear movement that we're seeing from face on, ideally from P6 onwards, would be predominantly the extension or the tucking of the hips more than the hip slide. The hip slide starts to affect your inclination to the ground more at that point. So here we're getting back into flexion much better. Because of the work you've been doing on that, you were holding on to the flex in the right knee a little bit too long on the way back. Accumulator 4 controlled much better, much more stacked over the ball when viewed from face on. So 4 to 5 improved based on the exercise that you were doing, and we just talked about refining that exercise a little bit and concentrating more on 4 to 5 and maybe 5.5. We don't really want to go beyond that point when we're working on that drill. From that position now, when you're in full flexion, if you will, the rotational aspect of your swing is going to continue. You can learn to tuck and slide at the appropriate rate. From that point, keeping the club on the inside, continuing hitting out at the golf ball with no need to flatten out that right wrist to turn the corner at the bottom. So we took a little look at it from face on, and what we're seeing was, like we said, getting back into flexion much better, 4 to 5, but then a real rapid extension through the ball. You can see that the level of the belt raises quite quickly and a little bit too much of a rate. So what we're looking for from this position onwards is a nice steady rotation, slide and extension. So, and we use the figure 5, it's an irrelevant figure, but we just used it as to give you a nice image. We should be from P5.5 onwards with the hips, we should be sliding at 5, extending or tucking at 5 and rotating at 5. So everything's happening at a nice steady rate. And what I'm seeing here is a player who is trying to slide at 5, trying to rotate at 5, but tucking and extending at about a 10. And we did that little trace on the V1 of what the centre of your hips were doing. We also talked about releasing the head a little bit more, watching the golf ball leave the mat was the feel, and we also talked about stopping a little bit quicker. That's just for you, just to remind you on the key points. But the main one was what we see here, to try and balance out that linear movement. What we're trying to do is we're trying to stop quick and max out the right tilt. So in the finish, Much more organised there, much more under control. You can see that the right heel isn't popping up quite as much. And he's banking in a little bit more, a sign that the hips have slid and that we've not extended at too quick a rate. So what we're seeing here now from down the line is we're seeing a player getting back into flexion a little bit better than he used to do. Not quite as good as at the start of your session. So obviously we need to, as we said, continue the work on that position that you see on the bottom right hand side of your screen. But from now, what we're going to try and do is we're going to try and max out the right tilt and stop quick, as opposed to extending at too fast a rate. Now you can see the difference in your ability to maintain your inclination to the ground. The tilts have been maintained much longer. The right tilt at this point is created by the hips sliding for longer. Whereas here, the hips have tried to slide, but the extension and the tucking is so severe that it's never going to override that sort of standing up move that we've got. So stopping the arms quick, maxing out the right tilt, and you're using the right tilt in the finish to improve the hip slide throughout the swing. So I've not got a problem with the fact that the hips are turning. They should turn, they should extend, but they should also slide at the same rate. At the moment on the top left, you were sliding at a certain rate, you were rotating at a desired rate, but you were extending way too fast. So we're using your ability to maintain your inclination to the ground to control the rates at which we do things. So key points from the lesson, other than releasing the head and watching the ball leave the mat, were to finish quick or finish shorter and max out the right tilt. Great work. Love the difference in the position of the foot in the finish and the hips in the finish, particularly from face on. Looks much more the finished article. Keep up the good work, and I look forward to working with you again in a couple of weeks' time. And remember, it's not necessarily what you do, it's the rates at which you do them, and that's what this lesson was all about. Good luck with it. I'll speak in a few weeks' time. Well done.